Welcome to Caregiving Club's Newscast for YouTube. I'm Sherri Snelling. I'm a corporate gerontologist, an author, and a consultant, and I have a background in journalism. And that's what this newscast is all about. I notice that there isn't a lot of information out there for caregivers where we gather caregiver self-care, what's happening in the workplace with employees who are caregiving, how to make our homes, our well spaces, home design, maybe some pop culture stories and headlines, latest research, latest products. We're going to gather it all here and we're going to bring it to you every couple of weeks and tell you what is the latest, greatest. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel where you're going to learn about all things caregiving that will help you on your caregiving journey. Welcome, everybody, to our very first Caregiving Club newscast. Something new that we're trying. This is part of our YouTube channel, and we are kicking this off in January of 2026. For many of you, of our loyal fans and listeners who have followed our podcast, what we've done in that podcast over the last 5 years is we've included, news of the day that's happening in caregiver wellness, home design, caregiving in the workplace with employers and employees, brain health, and Alzheimer's. And we've kind of woven that in between those great expert interviews that we've been bringing to you on the podcast. Well, we're going to do it differently this year. We're going to take those newscasts out of the podcast. We're going to keep all the great interviews. In fact, we're going to be able to do more interviews now for our podcast, which of course you can listen to on Apple Podcast, Amazon, Sirius XM, Spotify, Pandora, et cetera, et cetera. You can find us just about everywhere. And you can also find the video version of our podcast on our YouTube channel. And then the news that we've been doing, we're going to start bringing that to you more frequently as well. And we will put out every couple of weeks our newscast from Caregiving Club. And the reason why we're doing this, and the reason why I had even started it in the podcast, is because what I saw out there is there are a lot of newsletters, a lot of information that's kind of insider baseball information. And what I mean by that is a lot of the caregiving organizations, particularly a lot of the advocacy groups and those that advocate for caregivers on Capitol Hill and with policymakers, they are very focused on the policies. But those are kind of things that don't really necessarily play into our daily lives as caregivers, right? So I looked around and it's pretty cut up. I mean, you can find some news here or there, or maybe some products and companies make announcements, but it's a little bit all over the place. And I felt like, wow, this is something that's really a gap. So this is why I've started this Caregiving Club newscast, because I want to be able to tell you, okay, what are the latest products? What are the latest programs? What are the kinds of things that maybe you should know as a caregiver that you may not see in the daily news? And because I'm kind of hopefully on top of a lot of different areas, whether it's age tech, whether again it's design in the home and aging in place in the home and home modification, or senior living news, what's happening in assisted living and memory care, but also what's happening with, costs of care, really interesting new programs that you may not be aware of, and what's happening in the workplace. Because I do so much work with employers, I wanted to be able to also bring to you those trends. So all of that is what this new newscast is going to be all about. So we really hope that we get all of our loyal listeners from our podcast to sign up and subscribe for this Caregiving Club newscast. It will be offered only through YouTube. It will be video version only, but that way we can also put up some really cool images and stuff of products and the other things that maybe we're talking about. And then certainly we'll have links for all the resources and things that we're talking about. So again, I just want to say Happy New Year. Welcome back. We're really excited to bring all this to you. And with that, we're going to kick off our very first Caregiving Club newscast, starting with Caregiver Wellness News. Hey, so for our Caregiver Wellness News this last week in January 2026, we're going to capture a little bit of news that happened at the end of last year and some other things that have been announced So this year, we're also going to focus a little bit more on financial wellness because January is Financial Wellness Month. And for those of you who have read my book, Me Time Monday, the book talks about the 7 elements of wellness in our life, financial wellness being one of those. So it is really important for us to, make sure that we've got balance in our financial health and our financial resiliency and wellness and all of that. And here are some things that might help you. Something that's interesting. This is a USA Today article that came out, and it was about long-term care and using a new artificial intelligence AI tool to calculate what your future long-term care costs may be. Now, there are some other tools out there that just simply tell you what are the costs of long-term care, and it is somewhat limited. The Cost of Care survey, which is really great, comes out from Genworth and Care Scout. They put out information about what is the cost of in-home care, home health aides in the home versus personal care in the home. What is adult daycare cost? What is assisted living costing if you have a private room or a semi-private room, memory care, and nursing home. And then they drill down on that so that you can look at the costs of those things in every state, because we know there's a lot of long distance caregivers out there, and you may not be living in the same state your loved one is, and you're trying to kind of calculate what this all might mean. How do you plan ahead for the future, which is really great if you are doing that. So that's a really great tool, but this is a little different, and it comes out from a new company, and we're going to hopefully get them on our podcast, but it's called Waterlily. And so again, they're using an artificial intelligence tool where they're gathering and machine learning aggregate of what people are searching for on long-term care costs, but also, they will be able to personalize it to you and give you a readout and a report. And I want to just, this is a little bit of sticker shock, but the reporter who wrote this article for USA Today was 28 years old, obviously a young person, not yet caring for older parents or in-laws or grandparents or anything like that, but anticipating that those costs may be coming up, but also what would her costs look like when she gets to the age, and what age might that look like? So it asks a whole lot of questions. It asks things like, do you smoke? Do you drink? Do you work out? How many siblings do you have? Where do you live? What kind of work do you do? I mean, it's kind of intensive. I think the entire survey takes a few minutes, like 15, maybe 20 minutes or so to do. But then what you get is this very personalized report. So here's what hers said. 28 years old. It said that she should anticipate needing to go into some kind of assisted living or skilled nursing care around the age of 86, which is pretty average even for today. We see most people who are going into those types of long-term care communities and facilities are in their 80s. But here's the thing that really shocked me when I read it. It would cost her for this care then for the rest of her life, which anticipated it to be maybe another 5 to 6 years, $1 million. Okay. Woo! I went, holy smokes. And here I thought things were costly today, but we have to put this all into context. She's only 28 years old. We're talking about 60 years from now. We're talking about, hopefully, if those kinds of long-term care and healthcare costs do go up that much, that salaries and, the ability to be financially healthy, so you can afford that type of cost, is commensurate. It's keeping track, let's say. So it's not just the costs that are going up, but your ability to pay for those costs. But I do feel like it's a little bit of an aha moment for all of us when we do look at the cost of some of these things. And I'm going to get into one article I wrote recently for a journal for financial advisors. It is important for us at any age to start looking at this stuff. So let me talk a little bit about that journal article I just wrote. So it's the Journal of Financial Services Professionals. I've been a guest columnist for the Financial Gerontology column that was started by a very dear friend, mentor, colleague. He was actually my professor in college, and then we wound up working together on some projects over the years. He brought me in to be one of the guest columnists for this column he started, and his name was Neil Cutler, who I consider the godfather of financial gerontology. He used to put together educational courses for financial advisors and others. And he, unfortunately, we lost Neil last fall, right around the holidays. And so, Neil, just shout out to you, rest in peace. You've just been a wonderful person in my life. Anyway, the article that I wrote was about Alzheimer's and the sandwich generation. And of course, we know that 1 in 3 adults over 85 will have some type of dementia, and will live another 7 years on average. Now, they could live much longer, but at 85, if they're diagnosed, they'll live on average another 7 years. We also know today there's 7 million older adults who are living with dementia. That's going to grow to 13 million by 2050. And caregivers are in their role of caring for someone with dementia twice as long as others. So 9 years on average. Although I've talked to many people and we've had people like Lori LeBay of Alzheimer's Speaks. She has her own podcast, a very, very popular podcast. She spent 20 years caring for her mom with dementia. So it can be a very long caregiving journey, something we just, again, need to kind of brace ourselves for, plan ahead for, make sure that we know that so that we can insert ourselves into that care journey and have that self-care that is so important. But here's some things you may not know. So in the article, I bring out a lot of statistics. I'm giving a lot of advice to financial advisors about how they can better guide family planning, both from the older client's perspective, but also the younger client who will become more than likely a caregiver to a parent with Alzheimer's. 50% of elder financial abuse victims have dementia. This isn't too surprising, but it's something we have to be diligent about because we know that when our loved ones do develop diseases like Alzheimer's disease, that they don't have the cognition to stay on top of things. And this is where they can become very, very vulnerable to all the scammers and identity theft and other people that are out there. And there are a lot of great services, by the way, that can help you, thwart all of those threats. EverSafe, Liz Lowy, we had her on our podcast. So you can look for her podcast. I think it was I should have had this note, but I think it's season 2 or season 3. Also, we just recently this year, our first podcast for season 6 was with Emily Treasure of Raymond James and also Margaret Sterner of Raymond James. But Emily talked about how Raymond James financial advisors, they have partners now who are kind of focused in this caregiving area and long-term care, and EverSafe is one of their partners. And what that means is the financial advisor can put you right in touch with EverSafe. And what EverSafe does is it's a subscription service that really monitors your loved ones' activities financially and protects them from home title fraud and protects them from romance and grandparent scams and all these other things that we know are out there. So there's a lot of resources. You may just not know about them. And one thing I think is really interesting is the financial service industry has decided to put themselves in a place of being now a consultant, helping you navigate a little bit with some of particularly the financial side of caregiving and cost of care. So, make sure if you have a financial advisor, you're talking to them about these things. They should be bringing it up proactively. That's kind of what the industry is moving towards. But I did want you to know that those things are out there. Now, I wanted to also read this. One study found adults with dementia were up to 27% more likely than cognitively sound adults to experience a large decline in their liquid assets, such as their savings, their checking accounts, their stocks, their bonds. So again, even if you haven't had a diagnosis of dementia with your loved one, you want to be on top of their finances if you have any concerns at all about their cognition, because it will start years before they may get a diagnosis. So you don't want to let years go by where their assets are declining that are going to be the things that you need to help take care of them, just simply because they aren't able to cognitively manage these things. The study also said that another study showed people with dementia had subprime credit scores 2.5 years before a dementia diagnosis. So that's interesting to know what their credit score looks like. And these changes in financial activity are sometimes the first sign for families and advisors that a person does have dementia. So in other words, you may not be worried, but then all of a sudden you see this or you become aware of this and you're like, oh, wait a minute, mom or dad or whomever has always been on top of their finances. They've always been rock solid on this stuff. What's going on here? That could be maybe your first tip off that a loved one has dementia. So, anyway, that's an article. Unfortunately, you have to be a subscriber to the Trade Journal to read it, but I'm going to have a link to it on my website. So, I'll put that up on our show notes for you. Then I want to move on now to Caregiver Wellness. And, in January, there's a big, huge show called the Consumer Electronics Show. It's in Las Vegas. It's like the biggest show on earth, internationally, globally, whatever you want to call it, for consumer technology. And a big, 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 big part, of that show is now becoming age tech and what we call care tech for caregivers. And so ARP has a huge booth, lots of partners in that booth, but there's also a lot of other showcase for age tech solutions and stuff are out there. So, one of the top New Year's resolutions for this year was I need to get better sleep. I think that's probably something a lot of us think about, right? Sleep is now top of mind. We see so much of the science around how it affects our brains and our cognition in later life and performance, on a daily basis and all those other kinds of things. So we agree because sleep is one of the important things I put in my Me Time Monday book about your physical wellness. It is, if you could do anything to make yourself more physically healthy, it is sleep. Seriously. Before working out, before nutrition, if you don't get good sleep, a lot of that kind of goes by the wayside. And there's a lot of science about that. I won't go into, a deep dive on that because it's in my book. You can read it. We've also done, podcasts with sleep experts where we've talked through some of these things. And I've done some of our self-care in 7-minute solution videos on sleep. So you can check those out on our YouTube channel. But one of the things I found really interesting coming out of CES is that there's a lot of what we call now neuroscience. Neuroscience, by the way, I'm so excited because when I went back and got my master's in gerontology, I specialized in neuroscience. And it was a big focus for me because I'm fascinated with the brain, and not just, dementia and Alzheimer's later in life, but also just brain health throughout the lifespan. What do we need to do to protect our brain? Because it's kind of a new territory. We have a lot of science now focused on the brain, but it's really only happened over the last 30, maybe 40 years. And over the last 20 years is when we really found out that neuroplasticity, which is where you can build new neuronal connections in your brain that strengthen your brain in different areas to do different functions. We didn't think that was possible. We thought, once the brain cells started shrinking and dying off, that was it. You were born with a certain amount, and we were always told, like in college, if you drink too much, you're going to, kill those brain cells. You won't get them back. Well, guess what? I'm not saying you should go off and drink yourself silly in college, but you can build them back. But, moderation, people, balance, remember. Anyway, so let me tell you about these two neurotech, because that's now a new category, neurotech products that are on the market that are specific for sleep that deal with the brain and brain health. So the first one is called WillSleep, and it is billed as a non-invasive neurostimulation device. It actually works with your vagus nerve. Now, we did a self-care in 7 minutes video on the vagus nerve, and I write about it in my book, again, Me Time Monday. The vagus nerve is the longest nerve in your body, starting at the base of your neck and going all the way to the bottom of your spine. And it is one of the number one things that you can manipulate to help you when you are stressed out to get back into a calm homeostasis, or what we call balance. And so neurostimulation with the vagus nerve is now one of the new trendy things that's happening out there. Anyway, this is a little round sensor that you wear on your neck, and you wear it for about 15 to 20 or 30 minutes a day. And it sends these pulses to your vagus nerve, but it's also doing artificial intelligence machine learning. So it's learning about you. How often are you stressed? How often do these pulses need to be sent out? Is the 15 minutes good enough for you, or do you have to up that to 30? Or do you need, so it really reads what we call your biorhythms and your brain waves. and it's from a South Korean company. It won the CES Innovation Award, which is always kind of nice kudos. That's, kind of gives some confidence to this product. And in a 5-week clinical study, it showed that 82% improved their sleep quality and had an 80% reduction in insomnia symptoms for the participants in the study. Okay, pretty interesting. No cost on this, but I expect it'll follow similar other products like this where you pay a certain amount for the actual sensor, and then you have an app and a subscription so that you can have that ongoing data feedback and all of that. But we don't know how much it's going to cost, so we'll keep you posted on that. The other product from CES was LumiSleep from a company called LumiMind, which actually does a lot with gaming and neuroscience around gaming and stuff, but they're moving a lot into the wellness space. And this is a headband. Now, this uses EEG sensors that actually uh, correlate to your brain waves. And it uses what we call personalized sound that instantly guides the brain into a natural sleep state. And by the way, it is very different from the Lumi Sleep sound machine. So if you go to Amazon, you might see a Lumi Sleep sound machine. This is not it. That is something totally different from a totally different company. This is not on the market yet. Again, both these products are coming out sometime this summer and fall. But it's really kind of interesting because it does personalize it, because everybody does have difference in their alpha, beta, and delta, brain waves, which are part of your sleep science. So it starts to interpret what your sleep looks like, and then it instantly starts to recognize when it needs to send these pulses um, that will help give the sounds off, but then coordinate with the brain to either get you back to sleep if you've woken up, if you have a lot of awakenings, or to keep you in your sleep cycles. So it's pretty interesting. The battery life is 12 hours, and the data is all encrypted for privacy and protection, because I know that's a big issue when it comes to a lot of these AI personalized. We're going to read everything about how your body is working, but thankfully they're not going to sell it to anybody. Anyway, again, no costs on this product yet. That's the unfortunate thing with CES. They show so many things ahead of when they're actually available, but we'll keep you posted. And if they do come out, and if we do, we're going to test them. And if we do like them, maybe we'll put them into our holiday gift guide, because we like to take a look at a lot of this stuff. But those are two sleep things. So those are two things I just wanted to bring to you. January Financial Wellness Month, and also some sleep science based on neuroscience from CES. Hey, so moving into our second news segment, we're going to focus this one on well home design news, which, as you guys know from listening to my podcast, I am so passionate about. Again, one of the 7 elements of wellness in my book is environmental wellness. And when I talk about environmental wellness, what I really mean is our homes and our communities, and perhaps even our office spaces, as much control as we can have over those. But this is all a very big area now of really showing again how important our environments are in keeping us healthy, keeping us well, particularly helping with mental health, which is really interesting. A lot of people don't think about that correlation between your space. It can become a healing space. It's a sanctuary space, but we really have to pay attention and understand what's out there to help us. So I wanted to talk a little bit about well home design news, and there's a couple things that fit into this. As we said, January is Financial Wellness Month, so kind of blending financial wellness and also environmental wellness. I wanted to bring you a couple articles I saw that I thought were really interesting. One was from a Realtor.com survey that was in Realtor.com online, and it was about the sandwich generation downsizing their home, where they live or what they're thinking of buying, and either downsizing or going multi-generational. So 1 in 6 sandwich generation caregivers are, you know, obviously the sandwich generation is helping kids, and it could be older kids. It could be kids who have maybe gone away to college or come back to live under your roof. And as well, simultaneously, you're also caring for older parents, and you're managing household expenses, including mortgages or, you know, helping out with different costs of upkeep and care and all of that for both generations. So Mike Hathorn is the author of a book called The Great Housing Reversal, The New American Dream. And he talks about Gen X. Now, Gen X is the biggest part of the sandwich generation. We have a few millennials who would also fall into sandwich generation, where kids and parents at the same time. We have some boomers who might even still be, older parents and then have older parents themselves. But mostly it's Gen X. And, as we know, Gen X is known as the MTV generation. But now this author says there's a new kind of moniker that we can apply to Gen X, and it's called the hinge generation. Now, he has coined that because he said the next American housing trend will be the sandwich generation Gen Xers wanting to be in things like walkable communities. So again, maybe not moving out to the suburbs where you got to always hop into the car to get anywhere. Maybe it's being in a little bit more of a city or an urban setting where, the grandparents could walk the grandchildren to school, or you can walk to the store to get things, or you can walk to your optometrist or whatever it is. So it's kind of almost a little bit going back to what I would call the olden days of where we had these tiny little villages in, little spots throughout suburbia and around major cities. And they would be like one little main street, but it had pretty much everything you kind of needed for daily necessities and things like that. Well, that seems to be the trend of what Gen X is looking for. And so they're also looking to maybe build ADUs, so adult dwelling units. And that's where you might get a granny pod if you've got enough space in your backyard. A lot of people are taking their garages and converting them into little like tiny apartment units where it's just a one room with maybe a little kitchenette and of course a bathroom, and then a living space that can either convert into a bedroom space or a slight bedroom off to the bed off to the side or whatever it is. But a lot of them have like Murphy beds and things. So this is something big, and I know that in the state of California there was a lot of incentive given to homeowners, and this was during the pandemic and has continued to build ADUs. Now, if you're like me and some of my friends, the garage has become the storage unit. So it's going to be really hard to clean that garage out so you can get granny or grandpa in there. But a lot of people are doing it. And by the way, just FYI, because I mentioned it, I'm almost a year into my Swedish death cleaning program, where I am getting rid of stuff. And I am a little proud of myself because I would say the garage is at least, I would say we were about 65, 70% down from where we were, getting rid of stuff. So anyway, but the other thing that's happening with the sandwich generation and Gen X is that they're also looking at communities where they can have multi-generational housing. So this might be, there are some very specifically intentionally designed communities from some of the home builders. So I know Lennar, who I had done some work with, they have communities called Next Gen, and they're popping up all over the place. And these are homes that are built specifically for multi-generations. So there's a main home, and there's a main, gathering, kitchen, living, dining space. But then there's kind of an attached, separate little apartment. And again, that apartment might be for older kids. Maybe, your kids have moved out, they've had their first child, but somebody got laid off and now they need to kind of come back home. Well, rather than being right underfoot, right under your roof, they could be in this little apartment. Or again, the older parents or grandparents could live there. What's really interesting about this, and this is one of the reasons why Gen X really likes this, and I think it's smart, is that you can pool your money between different generations. So, for instance, the older grandparents probably have some assets that they could maybe help out with the down payment, which is always so difficult for new home buyers. We see everybody talking about how hard it is to become a new homeowner, and a lot of it is because you just don't have that down payment at the ready. Well, maybe grandma and grandpa can help out with the down payment, and you take over all the mortgage costs from there on out because you can cover that. So you're pooling your assets and your money. Also, caregiving. If grandma and grandpa are still in fairly good shape, maybe they can watch the kids. Maybe you don't need to invest in daycare. and grandma and grandpa can, help out with that. Conversely, if you have older children and grandma or grandpa are a little bit, have health issues, maybe not as mobile, well, the older adult children can now help out with the elder care side of things. So, what this does that I kind of really like is it helps take that burden off of the one caregiver, because we know very often in families, caregiving will fall on the shoulders of just one person. Sometimes it's the oldest child, sometimes it's, the daughter, or it's the person who lives closest to mom or dad. But whatever it is, it does happen to typically be a solo responsibility, even though you might have other people around you, other siblings or partners or spouses or whomever who can help out. This kind of almost, I don't want to say it forces the issue, it just makes it more normal, normalizes it. And it's all becoming part of this multi-generational kind of family living. And I wrote an article a few years ago for PBS called The Waltons Reboot 2.0. And for those of you who remember the Waltons TV series from the 70s, or if you like to stream old series, you may check it out. But it was exactly about this. It was about multi-generational living and how that's on the upswing. And these communities that are intentionally built are specifically for that. Now, here's something really interesting, too. Once the older generation passes, you've got this ADU, this granny pod, or this little attached apartment. Well, now you can rent it out. Now it becomes an income source in your retirement if you're older. And that's really nice because we know a lot of boomers didn't save a lot for retirement. So there's a lot of pluses and upsides to this. And I think it's something interesting. And again, whether you talk about it with your financial advisor, whether you just decide as a family, hey, this could really work for us, and it gives everybody peace of mind because they're close together. Right now, you might be living long distance, but you don't want that as your parents' age. It's something interesting to check out. Now, the next thing happening in kind of what we would call well home design news is more in the shopping arena. And there was a USA Today article again that talked about how Target wants to really own the wellness space. They want to be your go-to for all wellness products. Now, the article was written by Mike Snyder, and I have to just do a quick little reminiscent shout out. I've known Mike Snyder now for, I think, over 30 years. I first started working with him when he was a reporter working on video games, and I worked at Nintendo. And we had some fun together, and he wrote some great articles, and I was always so grateful because he always made me look good because I was doing marketing and PR for Nintendo. But anyway, so Mike is back, and he's now doing wellness, and I'm super excited because I'm in this space too, so maybe we can reconnect. But anyway, he wrote the article about how Target is increasing its wellness presence and footprint by 30%, adding thousands of new products. Now, let me just do a little reality check though here, okay? And this is no criticism, of course, of Mike's stuff, but when we talk about wellness products, we got to be careful because wellness has now become one of those words. It's the word of the day. Everybody loves it, everybody uses it, and yet they use it in ways that, I'm sorry, that's not really wellness. It could maybe help and be part of your wellness routine, but let's be real, people. We've got everything from wellness tuna fish to wellness shampoo to wellness pillows to, wellness toothpaste and wellness this and wellness that. And I'm just like, oh, good grief. Okay. To the point where now wellness almost seems like, well, what does it really mean? And the problem, unfortunately, with all of this is that the marketing folks out there, and I was one of them, so I know how it works, the ad people, the ad agencies and stuff, they've all jumped on this wellness bandwagon because it's huge. It's a huge market. It's growing. We know people are looking at taking better care of themselves, looking at life holistically. That's the whole point. Wellness is not about better shampoo for your hair that keeps it from thinning, or tuna fish that has this and that in it that gives you a boost and probiotic or something like that. It's all good. I'm not dissing it. But what I'm saying is true wellness is about balance. That is the definition of true wellness. This goes back to Hippocrates, and this is what I wrote about in my book, Me Time Monday. Wellness is about balance in life. You can eat great, use the right shampoo, have the right pillows, But if you lack in your social health and wellness, if you lack in your spiritual health and wellness, if you lack in your intellectual health and wellness, your environmental, your financial, your emotional, and then physical, of course, you're not going to be well. I'm sorry. You have to have balance. So, sorry for that little. Just I have to just do a little bit of let's be real about what wellness is. But all of these companies and products are starting to think about these things. So you can take it for what it is. There are some things out there that I think are great and are going to help. And so, a couple of things that I like that may or may not be marketed as wellness, but they could. There was a study done by NASA a couple decades ago. It's in my book, Meantime Monday, and they talk about how houseplants really affect air care. Air care, of course, is a big part of environmental wellness in our homes. After COVID, I think we all got very sensitive to the toxins in the air. We have over 40 pounds of dust and toxins in the air in our homes annually. Can you believe that? I can, because sometimes, if things get a little dusty, I can see how it piles up. But 40 pounds is a lot. And, that obviously admits a lot of VOx and a lot of other things into the air that we just don't need. So one of the things that NASA found is that you truly could improve your air care in your home just by having 5 houseplants. That seems to be the average, okay? 5 houseplants in your home. Now, not only is this going to help with air care, but visually, what this triggers the brain, and this is going back now to the neuroscience, the houseplants trigger the brain to see life, to see green. Green is our most optimistic color. It is the one that we correlate with life, with thriving, okay? And this is great, by the way, for older loved ones. If they don't have green plants, get them some, because this helps with the emotional and mental health of just how our brains work, knowing that there's life around us and making us feel the spark. I'll tell you something interesting. I did a little experiment where I didn't have a lot of green. I had a bamboo tree in our bedroom, but I put I love maidenhair ferns. So I put some maidenhair ferns in there. I put some of these other plants, and I'll have a list of them, but it's things like palm, English ivy, spider plants, bamboo. All of those are really great for air care. I put some of those into the bedroom, and I can tell you, remarkably, every time I walk into my bedroom now, I feel a little spark of happiness. I really do. And it's the green. My brain is going to the green and saying, you know what? Okay, we're alive. We can get it together. We can do this, whatever. Just making me feel a little bit more energetic. So that's just me personally. I don't know what you've experienced, but 5 houseplants is the average. And by the way, we do a self-care in 7 minutes video on this, so check that out. It's on our YouTube channel, free, but look for the one on biophilic design and houseplants, and it'll give you a lot more of the details on which plants are the best. The other thing I wanted to just mention really quickly, because it has to do with the home, is January is also National Eye Health Month. And there's a lot of stuff I could say about eye health, but I'm going to just focus on one, and that is lighting in the home. So when we are age 60, we need 3 times the lumens of light that we needed when we were 20. And it's partially because the retina is starting to harden in the eye. It becomes harder then to get the light emission to the optic nerve, to the brain, yada, yada. I won't go into the science for you, but we need more light as we get older, and particularly in areas where you might be doing tasks. So in the laundry area, in the kitchen area, for sure, you need a really good reading lamp. And this becomes, of course, more important as we get older. So there's some really good lamps out there. Now we have so many great light bulbs. My gosh, I was in the hardware store the other day, getting a full rundown on how I can have, soft light, pink light, sunset light, whatever. I mean, again, a little bit of choice overload, which I write about in my book, but it's kind of nice to know I have some options on that. But just think about it, because not good lighting, having really bad lighting, we'll say it a better way, is one of the contributors to falls in the home. We know that 1 in 4 people over 65 fall in the home. 3 million seniors wind up in the ER every single year. It can lead to a lot of health issues like broken hips and injuries, traumatic brain injury. It can also lead to death. Amazingly, falls for people who are older are, something that can really hurt their mortality. So we want to be cognizant of all the things that we can do to prevent those falls. One of them is get better lighting in the house. It's good for everybody because we do too much near work and we do too much with blue light. So you want to see if you can, use some candlelight, use some soft light, do some things, but get some good light into the house where you're doing a lot of tasks and all of that. So that was our Well Home Design News. Now we're going to move into caregiving in the workplace. So one of the new things that we're adding to our Caregiving Club newscast that we're going to be doing for you every couple of weeks is the caregiving in the workplace. And this is not necessarily completely new because, again, for those of you who have listened or watched our podcast, you know that I do a lot of work with employers and very grateful to have that work and really understand what's going on in our workplaces when it comes to caregiving support for employees, but also what's happening maybe with older workers. And so we've woven those into some of our news that we've done on our podcast, but I wanted to break it out as a very special segment because there's so much happening and because I think that it's kind of exciting. There's a lot going on in what employers are looking to do to support their talent, their biggest asset being the employees. And knowing now that we've got multiple generations in the workforce and many of them are experiencing caregiving in different ways, whether it's, what I wrote in my book it's called Generation C now, Generation Caregiver. And that goes all the way from caring for children through the lifespan of caring for older adults, whether it be, a spouse, maybe it's a sibling, maybe it's a friend, could also be parents, older parents or in-laws, could also be grandparents. So, care is kind of consistent and constant throughout our lives. And it's one of the things I think is really important certainly employers, a lot of them are starting to focus on this. We're going to bring you all the news that's happening in the workplace that'll affect you as employees. But also we know we have listeners who are in the HR departments. So we hope that maybe we'll bring you some interesting things that you can think about or, new programs and innovations that are out there. So let me start this off with last year, the Society for HR Management, which is a big, huge organization that kind of delivers a lot of program and education and policy work around HR and workplaces and employees. They did a survey in last spring, and it revealed that 40% of workers report their responsibilities hinder their career advancement. So we've seen that before in a lot of caregiving studies where, caregivers feel like, okay, I'm going to hold myself back because I'm making the choice. I can't really travel on business anymore. I got to be here for mom or dad. So I can't go for that promotion that has a lot of travel involved. Or, I can't spend the extra hours and throw myself into this or whatever it is. There could also possibly be a little bit of stigma on the side of a manager who says, I'd really love to promote Sherri, but I know she's in the middle of this caregiving thing and I really need for somebody to be here. I need them to be on alert, not needing to ask for time off and have that flexibility or all those types of things. So it's a struggle, right? And I can see both sides of what happens there. But here's something really interesting that came out in, I think it was in the SHRM report, what we call SHRM, Society HR Management. But I thought that it really rings true. And I think this is a very important statement to make sure everybody knows about. Caregiving is not a personal issue for employees. And that's profound, okay? Because I think we still see it that way. It's still the burden of the employee, right? It's their family, their situation, unique to them, their needs, all that kind of stuff. Caregiving is not a personal issue for employees. It is a critical, strategic workforce issue. Okay, interesting, right? A little bit of a spin on what I think we all think about because caregiving is not one size fits all, it is very personalized. Everybody who becomes a caregiver who's also an employee has very different needs, personalities, family dynamics, support and help. Um, and so you have to kind of factor all of those elements in, right? But what I think this report is saying is, look, don't look at the individual employees who are challenged with caregiving. Look at how many people are being affected by caregiving in your workforce. And hey, by the way, you got to pay attention. We got to figure this out. How do we build some benefits and buffers and other things? And it isn't all just about the bennies, right? First of all, it's just the acknowledgement that caregiving and working go hand in hand. We have, of course, many more women now in the workforce. Almost, I think it's more than 50%, right? 51%. I haven't looked at the latest stats, so forgive me. But, women are equal now to men in the workforce. And women used to be the primary caregivers as the default when they weren't working. So now we've got this dilemma. Who's going to take on the caregiving? How are we going to do this? Oh, by the way, guess what? We're living longer. Yeah. And those 20 to 30 bonus years may not be all in really great health, might need a lot of help bathing, eating, fixing meals, whatever it is, right? Okay, so it's a lot to think about, but it is affecting employers, and they can't just, be the ostrich and put their head in the sand. They've got to understand, okay, this is definitely affecting us. We don't want to lose good talent. We want to continue to retain and attract people. And how do we do that knowing that this is kind of a life event that almost every single employee is going to go through at some point in their life, and maybe multiple times, right? You're going to have kids. Then maybe you become a caregiver to a spouse, then or to an older parent, then maybe a caregiver to a spouse. You might, during the course of your work life, go through 3 different caregiving journeys. So it's kind of hand in glove, if you will, with what's happening. So this report said 100 million Americans are balancing career and caregiving responsibilities. I think that's right, because I think it's 1 in 3. Is that right? I don't know. That number seems a little high, but 1 in 3 are caregivers. And again, caregiving being defined as anyone caring for a small child, infant, all the way through older loved ones. Okay. And it includes 14.3 million who care for service members and veterans. So this is why SHRM partnered up with the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, which, by the way, the Elizabeth Dole Foundation is one of the very unique veterans organizations out there, because they're really the only group that focuses on the caregivers of veterans. Now, the veterans themselves will benefit from the programs and the different things that they're doing, but their primary focus is on those caregivers. So whether it's the wife, the mother, the sibling, whomever. And we do know that we have more women who have seen active duty, who are coming back with the same kind of issues, health issues that our warfighters have, whether it's PTSD, whether it's, disability, paraplegia, whatever it is. But primarily we've seen more women in the veterans community become the caregiver of their warfighter who comes home. So what they're doing is they're building up awareness and training and support, and kind of putting the focus on caregivers in the workplace, but also caregivers of veterans in the workplace. So a little bit of a special subset, but a lot of the things that obviously those caregivers go are going to affect other types of caregivers as well. So kind of an interesting partnership there. The other thing that I thought was really exciting is I follow very closely the Global Wellness Institute, and they do a whole lot of really great stuff, annual conferences, webinars, all kinds of stuff. They have great podcasts. The top 10 trends for 2026 in wellness, get this, corporate wellness. Yep, wellness in the workplace is now in the top 10 of all wellness, and this is like everything that's happening out there in wellness. Corporate wellness is in the top 10. And again, it's based around both the caregivers, but really more about the longevity. It's about the older workers now, the people who are taking care of themselves, who can still be performing well and be productive in their jobs well into their 70s or 80s. I got to tell you, my mom's 82, She still goes to work. She doesn't go to work every day like she used to, but we have a family-run business. She's still an owner of that business. My brother is the head of the business now and runs it, but she still goes to work. She still oversees things. She wants to keep her hand in it. It makes her feel not just peace of mind of what's going on, but relevant, and keeps her up to speed on things in today's world and all the changes that are happening. We were talking about AI the other day. So she's still sharp. She's 82. She can still run the show, man. So, it's not about being 62 and getting your bum kicked out to retire, unless you want it and you've got the means to do it. Then I say go for it. But longevity is redefining our workplaces, and it's defining it in two ways: the older workers and the caregivers. Um, so the corporate wellness space is about $61 billion right now today. It's going to double by 2033. Oh, that's big. And one of the things that I have counseled a lot of employers on, and I actually did this really fantastic presentation to a host of CEOs that was brought together by this company who provides caregiving benefits. And they had me come in and say, talk about the trends in the workplace that you see from the caregiver perspective. And so anyway, I loved it. I was really honored and flattered, because we had like the CEOs, HROs, which are the human resources chief officers, CFOs of companies like Google, Delta, JP Morgan Chase, or JP Morgan, sorry. You name it, Nike. They were all in the room listening to me. So I thought was, woo, that's kind of exciting. But what I talked to them about are the four trends that I see. And I think one of the biggest disconnects is they're spending a lot on corporate wellness, as we just saw. Connect that back to your caregiver benefit, because caregiver benefits are very often focused on the elder who needs care. Okay, let's get you the right resources. Okay, that's all good. Let's educate you on what senior care looks like. Okay, all good. And by the way, that's a big piece of what I do for employers. I do monthly webinars for employers on different aspects of caregiving, different topics. So that's all really good. In fact, the number one thing that I've seen emerge over the last few years, and a lot of the policymakers talk about, well, paid family leave, and even SHRM still talks about paid family leave. It's great. Listen, no one's going to turn down free money, right? 12 weeks off paid so you can care for your loved one. Great. But talk to any caregiver out there where their caregiving role is over in 12 weeks, forget about it. Okay. It goes on, folks. So 12 weeks, great. I'll take it. And then what? Now I'm back to my burnout, my overwhelmed, don't know where to go, whatever. Anyway, the reason I say this is I think one of the biggest things that's emerged in the last few years, really just probably over the last 5 or 10 years, is the care navigation piece. Because the one thing is, as caregivers, we don't know what we don't know. We sometimes don't know the questions to ask. We don't know what's available out there to even ask the question. We need help. We need to be guided. By the way, if you want me to stay on the job and be productive and not be stressed out, even though I'm going to probably be stressed out, help me. Make me do research at night on the internet for hours and hours, and I don't even know what I'm researching for. See, this is the dilemma for caregivers, right? Particularly if you're working and also got kids you're taking care of and all the other stuff, right? So the care navigation piece, I'm seeing it's starting to emerge, and I'm happy as the number one thing that employers could offer as a benefit to their employees. And that's perfect because, again, caregiving is not a one size fits all. Every family, every caregiver in your workplace is going to have a different scenario and different needs. And by the way, over the course of caregiving for someone for the average of 4.5 years, or if you're a dementia caregiver, 9 years or beyond, we have many caregivers who are serving this role for 20 years. The care needs are changing. You don't just solve it on day one and okay, we're all good to go. No, in another 6 months it'll change. In another year it'll change. So you have to keep coming back to, okay, now what? Now this is happening, particularly again in something like dementia, where you have stages and progression of the disease. Your loved one might be somewhat independent in the early stage. By the end stage, you're needing so many different things that you didn't need in the beginning. So for navigation really number one, and it's a big thing. And then when we talk about older workers, we know that workers ages 55 or older have been the fastest growing age group in the labor force for more than 2 decades. Right now, they make up 24% of the US workforce. That was a stat actually from a couple years ago, and that was double from what the 55 plus represented in 1994. So older workers are also, again, but they're going to come into the workforce. They're going to have experience, and there's all talk about mentorship and all kinds of things. They also may have a spouse that's ill, or they may even have older parents. Let me tell you, there's a lot of people out there who are in their 70s caring for a parent who's in their 90s. That will probably be me because I'm in my very I'm in my very early 60s. My mom's 82, right? She's vigorous. She's, primarily pretty healthy. I could see myself caregiving for her well into my 70s and 80s, and she's in her 90s and 100s. So it can happen. But so these are all the things that are just challenging those wonderful HR people out there who are struggling to keep up with all this and figure it out. But you can't ignore it anymore. It is the new dilemma, if you will, but let's not paint it as negative. It is the new opportunity for employers to really create something that is going to help the workforce have the flexibility to not just be caregivers, but also to be good workers and to help them reconnect with their own wellness, because we really have to guide them to those wellness benefits and make sure they're taking advantage of those, because you need to keep them healthy and mentally healthy, especially on the job. And then something else, a couple of quick things, because I want to get, by the way, we're going to do a pop culture. We don't do it every single news segment, but we've got some pop culture to talk about with Rob Reiner and his son Nick and that tragedy that happened over the holidays. So I want to get to that. But just another couple of quick things. There was a great article in Forbes about the rise of chief longevity officers and chief gerontology officers. So this is going to be the new ticket. This is going to be the new hire that you're going to want in your C-suite. I'm so excited because as a gerontologist, it's like you feel validated. But just pay attention, HR people, because and employees know that there are experts like myself as a gerontologist, corporate gerontologist, coming in to really help shape and promote your needs and the challenges that you have, because we understand that lifespan, aging needs, and all that. But anyway, so that's really exciting. L'Oreal is a clear thought leader in this. They are one of the first big multinational multinational, whatever, global companies to have a chief longevity officer. Bank of America a few years ago hired our friend to be the director of financial gerontology. So we have a podcast that we'll share with you on that. But a lot of these companies have been doing this, and it's gonna take off. It's gonna be one of the big things for the future. So think about that also from a career perspective if you're out there listening. And then just really quickly, I mentioned that I did this thing for these CEOs. So I did a presentation. I also wrote a few articles, and I just wanted to recap 7 ways that companies can become, have more better care aware. You're a care aware company and you're creating care culture. Those are kind of some of the things we talk about as we see these trends happen. But here we go with the 7. 1, do an annual audit of caregiving employees and their issues. You need to ensure that not only are they more aware of your senior care programs and benefits, but that those get as much attention as the child care benefits. Because again, we've got sandwich generation and we've got people who are caregiving across that lifespan. Number 2, recognize and celebrate, particularly when it's higher level people from the C-suite or managers and supervisors who are caregiving, because that means you get it. You know me. You know what I'm going through. It's a lot easier to go talk to a supervisor or to feel like your company cares about you if the CEO has talked about their caregiving experience and they understand how tough it is. Because it doesn't really matter where you are in the what would you call it, the matrix, if you will, of a workplace. Everybody goes through the same challenges. Some people might have more financial resilience, but there you go. Um, and then encourage, an employee resource group. I do a lot of talks for ERGs, which I love. So these are the special groups that employees form where they get together and say, hey, we really want to help promote things that are going to be very specific to this thing I'm interested in. And so there are a lot of groups out there. I just did one for a big company back in Minneapolis in the fall, talked to their ERG on caregiving and the sandwich generation. Make sure you're training your supervisors and managers on how to support employees who are caregiving. That's a big one. We got to have the emotional intelligence, the empathy in the workplace for what's going on. And it's a struggle. And if you haven't been through it, it's hard to be pathetic. It is. If you're maybe a younger supervisor and you just kind of really don't get it, we need to help you. We need to help you get it. Um, Hiring a chief longevity officer or chief gerontology officer, or at least having these experts on hand as consultants like myself, because we can help guide the things that you may not see. We can help you not trip over things that you may think are good that aren't necessarily going to play out that well in the workplace. Providing a care navigation service or benefit, again, that's you're not going to be able to put enough benefits packages together for the checklist of things that caregivers need. But what you can do is you can offer them someone to talk to. They can call, they can say, here's my deal. Okay, I got to figure out how to get the home set up for my mom. The hospital discharge people weren't very helpful. I don't have time to research this or whatever. Connect me, get me connected. What do I need to think about? Where's the checklist? How do I do this? How do I find this or whatever? That is the great thing about care navigation. Provide the education. Again, don't just do it once a year. You need ongoing education about caregiving because, again, you may not be a caregiver right now today, but in 6 months you will be. So all of a sudden you're going to start listening to the webinars that I do, and you're going to start, maybe going to some of the articles or start, researching some of this stuff. So you need to keep content and education on a constant drip, a constant flow. And then connect, as I mentioned, connect your caregivers to your wellness programs. Don't look at them as separate. Yes, everybody benefits from the wellness programs. Great. But is there a subset of the wellness program that you can, kind of like design for caregivers? It's one of the things that my Me Time Monday is about that. It's about all the wellness stuff that anybody of any age, any health, whatever status you have, health can do. But for caregivers, I make it 7 minutes or less. I know you have no time. So be mindful of that. Don't just push the wellness on them, help customize it a little bit for your caregivers, but get them connected so that they feel like you care about them and you're helping them to maintain that balance in life. So that's it for our caregivers in the workplace for this new segment. And now we're going to go into our pop culture. We're going to talk a little bit about the tragedy of Rob Reiner and his wife and our son, Nick. We have done our pop culture segments on some of our podcasts in the past, and certain things that might be happening with celebrities or certain movies out there that focus on caregiving, all of that. I wanted to kind of just highlight something that I think is so important, and really I wanted to focus on the caregiver piece of this, and that is the awful tragedy that happened over the holidays with the great actor director Rob Reiner. He's made some of my most favorite movies: When Harry Met Sally, A Few Good Men, The Princess Bride, on and on. And of course, his wife, Michele Singer Reiner, who was also a producer, and the tragedy of their son, Nick, who has been diagnosed with schizophrenia and who ended up murdering both of his parents in their home. Now, there's a lot of true crime podcasts out there, a lot of other kind of people who do kind of celebrity news. I'm not going to just rehash or, talk about the whys, of mental illness and what happened and why did Nick do this and what's happening with his latest legal representation, because he got the big name lawyer. I think his name is Alan Jackman. And then that person had to decline and step aside. So I'm not going to go into any of those details. You can find all of those with much people who are much better and much more ingrained in those details than I am. What I want to focus on though is the tragedy of mental illness in some families. And it doesn't have to be that way, but it is a huge challenge for many families. And one of the things I thought was really interesting is as this story was playing out, and I should say that if I didn't earlier, my apologies, Nick Reiner is allegedly been held in the murder of his parents. So he has not been tried yet. He's not been convicted. That's going to be the big show trial that we'll have coming up. But going back to while this was playing, I listened to a podcast with Dr. Drew Pinsky and Adam Carolla. Adam has one of the really great podcasts out there. I try to catch as many different podcasts as I can. They were talking about what do you do as a parent? I mean, and particularly I know in Hollywood, I shouldn't say that they struggle more with mental illness. That's probably not accurate. They're more high profile. We certainly hear about them more, but we know 1 in 5 adults is struggling with some type of mental illness. Now that could be depression or anxiety, but it can also be bipolar disorder. It could be being on the schizoid spectrum. It could be PTSD, all the things. And again, I'm kind of fascinated because this has to do with our brains. What's going on? What wiring is getting confused in the brains of people? And what can we do to address it? Because it just seems to be one of those things that, we hear the tragedies over and over. We hear the things going on. You might even know people personally or have something in your family, and yet there seems to be no answer. There's no solution. There's no help. There's no resolution. There's no, okay, this is how this is going to work now. Until recently. So we're going to get into that. But, apparently what has been reported is that he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. He had mental health issues as well as drug issues most of his life, even into when he was younger. Now, the question is, is it chicken or egg? Did the drugs create mental illness? Did the mental illness create the drug abuse? That's a great question. Psychologists, psychiatrists are on both sides of this fence. We do know that certain drugs can certainly exacerbate what goes on, particularly in young minds. That's why certain antidepressants cannot be used by people who are under the age of 20 because their brains are not formed well enough yet to absorb the kind of medication that an adult who has a formed brain who's age 30 or 40 can absorb. We know that prefrontal cortex, I should say, which is in the prefrontal lobes, does not completely form until your mid, sometimes even later 20s. I think I might be corrected here, but I think Nick is in his 20s. So there's, was his brain fully formed? I'm not giving him an out. I'm just saying all of these things have to come into play, and we have to also, as a society and as people who may be coming up against this, recognize all these things. But I guess they changed his meds more recently, and it exacerbated some of these more aggressive and certainly homicidal triggers. And that is probably going to be part of maybe what the defense will rely on. Anyway, I wanted to go back to the podcast because I thought it was really interesting because Dr. Drew, who is in the Hollywood community, he treats a lot of people who are in the Hollywood community as well as big corporate America and all of that. But he said, with a lot of these parents, they're on movie sets for weeks, sometimes even months. They're busy, they're doing this, they're doing promotion for their latest movie or their TV show or whatever. And he says, it's hard because they're not there necessarily to oversee all the issues, particularly if you have a child that is struggling or has been shown to have maybe some mental health issues. He said, but then what happens is they don't want to do the tough love. And the tough love is really, this is what he said. What they do is they opt out for these treatment centers, and there's a lot of them around. So it's the detox centers. And, he said these addiction retreats are really just cash cows for parents who feel hopeless or parents who just want to say, hey, I'm taking care of it. I'm sending the kid off to, rehab or whatever it is. He said they just don't work, unfortunately. And part of the reason why they don't work is while they're there at the retreat, sure, it might, be giving them some good skills and good cognitive behavioral therapy, which is talk therapy within the support groups and all of that. But what is happening is then when they get released, there's no continuum of care. There's no kind of like transitions because you can't just then. It's kind of similar to what happens with our war fighters and veterans who come home with PTSD. The Veterans Administration, and again, I may not have all the details straight because I forgot to look it up. But I do know that I think it's 60 days of treatment for PTSD for our veterans. And then you're on your own. 60 days to fix your brain from the trauma that you went through? Are you kidding me? So we have to be smarter about how the brain works. It is not a fast fix. Take this pill and you're going to be all better, or sit in this group therapy for a couple of weeks and we've got you all shaped up. No, it is an ongoing need where you slowly again transition back to what could maybe be normal life. So this is what Drew Pinsky was saying. He said, unfortunately, what has to happen to a lot of these children, and again, they're children. I wouldn't say Nick's a child because I won't go that far. I think you're a child until 18. Then I think you better, kind of step it up into being an adult. So he's a young adult. But he has always gotten it out. He's not gone to prison. He hasn't really been incarcerated. He was homeless, which is really sad for someone coming from the kind of family that you can imagine, the Reiners and their financial resources. But they didn't know what to do. They couldn't connect with him. I'm sure he wasn't staying connected, so they didn't even know. But they found out later after the fact that he had been homeless, and doing more drugs and all that kind of stuff. And it's just this vicious cycle. And it really drags everybody in the family down because, as you know, the daughter found her parents, the trauma she's going to have for the rest of her life. The other brother who has to live with the realization that his brother killed his parents. I mean, it's just heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. And it's heartbreaking for families who have to struggle with this. So the reason why I'm bringing it up is there was a recent announcement by the Trump White House talking about rebuilding mental health institutions. And I saw a lot of like comments come out of that, both sides, pro and con. Well, first of all, we are never going to go back to the horrific asylums. And let's not use that word at all with mental health anymore, please, people. We're not going to go back to that. It was horror. It's the worst horror movie you could ever imagine, right? How it got that bad, though, I would love some answers because it was being funded either federally or by the states. You want to know the taxpayer dollars are going to do good? Obviously not. So but we can't just put the burden on families. They don't know how to deal with people who have a mental illness. They're not trained in psychology and psychiatry. They don't know how to manage this. You can't be a 24/7 prison guard, making sure they stay on their meds, because many of them do go off their meds. And then that's where we have a lot of these problems and a lot of the assaults, all the horrific news in New York with people being pushed into the subway tracks and lit on fire. These people are all mentally ill and the families can't deal with them. And so we've got to figure it out. We just can't do it. Oh, yeah, okay, let's move on. Next news story. No, come on, we got to deal with it. So and as I said, it's toughest on the caregivers, whether you're the wife of somebody who has a mental illness, or you're the sister, or you're the mom, or you're the dad, or son, or whatever. It is just so hard. So what the Trump White House said is we need a continuum of care. Similar to what Penske was saying. He said, they need to go to prison. He said, I'm sorry, that's tough. And no Hollywood family, no Hollywood couple, big names are going to send their kids to prison. They just don't. And therefore, nothing is going to be solved. But he said, if they go to prison, they can't have access to the drugs. At least that's the theory, right? I know some drugs flow into the prisons, but basically they're not going to be all medicated up on the drugs that they love when they're in prison. Then they're going to get released. Now they need to go into some kind of an what they call assistive outpatient treatment, which is court ordered. And that's the first interim step. Now, these are places where hopefully there can be some of this therapy. They can be managed and watched over because they're going to live in this place. They are managed. They have to be tracked and managed. We got the technology to do this, by the way, people. We can do this if we really wanted to. And then maybe they go to a community where they are given some kind of a job or work, and they're working in kind of a collective, or they're working, in coordination with other things. And then maybe, and this is probably after years of going through all of this, they might be able to get to some type of a normal life. But we just have to be realistic. And it's going to take a lot of discipline. It's going to take money. But we have to do this. We have to do this for the families who suffer from this, and the caregivers who suffer from this, and also give dignity to the people who have mental illness. We don't want them excised from society, but we also don't want them to hurt themselves or hurt someone else. And there is no dignity in being homeless. There is no dignity into being a drug addict who's going to hurt somebody. Because when they do come out of the drug coma that they're in, can you imagine? I mean, many of them have then it creates depression over what they've done. So we've got to really figure this out. Anyway, the Treatment Advocacy Center is a great resource. So we're going to have a link to that. But they actually do take care of people with severe chronic conditions like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder with personality borderline disorder that can lead to things like homicide or even suicidal tendencies, and who can't maintain their medications on their own and need some type of institutional care. Just to do a shout out to the 988 number, that is your lifeline. If you have any kind of suicidal ideation, call that number immediately. It's a crisis lifeline. You've got, trained therapists who can help you through your thoughts on that. There's also another nonprofit by actress Glenn Close. She has both a sister and a nephew who have mental illness, and it's called Bring Change to Mind. They have created 450 high school clubs. So they're really focusing on the younger folks, getting them normalized with mental health. What is it? What does it look like? How do we help? If somebody has it, what can we do? So it's erasing that stigma. And then, as I mentioned, the Treatment Advocacy Center has toolkits and resources and can help with that interim step, which is that outpatient, getting back to normal life, but not quite, being managed a little bit or whatever. I just wanted to bring it up because I feel like it is so important. And mental health is something that we sweep it off to the side. And so many of society's ills are based around people who do need our help. They need our help, and we need to not ignore them, and we need to give the help to the families and the family caregivers. So I'm sorry, that's what I'm passionate about. I want to definitely see something change here, and hopefully when we see these tragic headlines, it reminds us all, yep, we got to figure this out, folks. We don't want any more of this to be happening. So with that, on a lighter note and a happier note, I just want to say thank you again for being hopefully subscribers to our Caregiving Club newscast on YouTube. So please subscribe. We would love to have your subscriptions, and then you'll get notifications on every time a new newscast comes out, as well as our other content and our podcasts, as I said, the video versions on YouTube, or you can listen to it on your favorite audio channels. But again, thank you. And we're going to have a great year this year with all this great news coming out. We look forward to the next Caregiving Club newscast. Care and stay well.